Okay, I want you to think about something weird for a second. A French baker is up at 3 a.m. shaping baguettes. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, someone's pouring teff batter onto a hot plate to make injera. Over in Mexico, there's the pat 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 sound of someone making tortillas. In the Middle East, someone's slapping pita dough into a blazing hot oven. These people have never met. Their ancestors probably never met. And yet, they're all basically doing the same thing, making bread. And here's where it gets absolutely wild. Nobody told them to do this. There wasn't some ancient bread conference where humanity got together and said, "All right guys, we're all going to start grinding up seeds and baking them." No. This happened independently, over and over again, all around the world. So today we're diving into one of my favorite historical mysteries. Why the hell does every single culture have bread? Seriously, every single one. What's up everyone? Today we're talking about something you probably ate this week, maybe even today. Something so basic, so fundamental to human life, that we literally have sayings about it. Breaking bread. The best thing since sliced bread. Bread and butter. Our daily bread. Breadwinner. We have more phrases about bread than about any other food, and that's not an accident. But here's the thing, bread shouldn't exist. No, really. Think about it. Some absolute madman looked at grass and thought, I'm gonna eat that. But not just eat it. First I'm gonna beat the crap out of it, grind it into powder, mix it with water, and then, and this is the crazy part, I'm gonna leave it sitting around until it gets all bubbly and weird, then cook it. Who thinks of that? Apparently everyone. Because from ancient Egypt to the Aztecs, from Vikings to the Chinese dynasties, everybody figured this out. And that can't be a coincidence. So buckle up, because we're about to go on a journey through time, science, and some genuinely mind-blowing facts about the food that literally built civilization. And I'm not exaggerating, without bread, you and I probably wouldn't be here. Our entire species changed trajectory because someone decided to play with mushy grain paste. Let me tell you a story about the luckiest accident in human history. Picture this. It's about 14,000 years ago. The Ice Age is ending, which sounds nice, but it's actually kind of a disaster if you're a human. The big animals you used to hunt, they're dying off or migrating. The giant ground sloths, the mammoths, the cave bears, all checking out. The climate's going nuts. Your whole follow the mammoth herd's lifestyle. Yeah, that's not working anymore. So these desperate humans in the Fertile Crescent, that's modern-day Iraq, Syria, Jordan, that area, they start eating something they usually ignored, grass seeds. Specifically the ancestors of wheat and barley. Now raw wheat kernels are nasty, they're hard, bitter, and will absolutely wreck your teeth. But when you're hungry, you get creative. So these early humans start grinding them between stones, add a little water to make it easier to eat, and boom, you've got porridge. Boring, gross porridge, but it's calories, baby. But then something magical happens. Someone, somewhere, probably by complete accident, leaves their grain paste near a fire. Maybe they got distracted. Maybe there was a mammoth sighting. Maybe they were running from a saber-toothed cat. Who knows? But that paste dries out, hardens, and becomes the world's first flatbread. And this changes everything. See, porridge goes bad in like a day, maybe two if you're lucky. But this dried out proto-bread, it lasts for days, maybe weeks. You can carry it with you. You can store it. Suddenly, humans have portable calories that don't rot immediately. This is huge, huge. Think about what this means. For the first time in human history, you can save food for later without it spoiling. You don't have to eat everything right away like some kind of competitive eater. You can actually plan ahead. You can travel further. You can feed more people. You can survive a bad hunting day without starving. But wait, it gets better. Around the same time, something weird is happening with the wild grasses these people are harvesting. The seeds are getting bigger. The stems are getting stronger. Without even realizing it, humans are artificially selecting the best plants. Every time they harvest, they're picking the biggest seeds. When some seeds fall near their camps and grow, it's the big ones that got selected. This is evolution at warp speed. In just a few thousand years, which is nothing in evolutionary time, wild grass turns into something we'd recognize as wheat. The seeds triple in size. The stalks get sturdy enough to support the heavy seed heads. The seeds stop falling off the plant on their own, which is actually terrible for the plant's reproduction, but great for humans who want to harvest them. Fast forward a few thousand years, and wild grass has turned into wheat. The plant is so dependent on humans by this point that it literally can't survive without us. The seeds don't scatter on their own anymore, they need us to plant them. We didn't domesticate wheat, wheat domesticated us. I'm dead serious. This grass got humans to stop wandering around and settle down just to take care of it. It got us to clear land, irrigate fields, build storage facilities, develop math to track harvests, create writing to record who owns what grain. Wheat played us like a fiddle, and we fell for it because bread is just that good. But here's something even crazier. This wasn't a one-time thing. The same process happened with rice in Asia, corn in the Americas, teff in Africa, quinoa in South America. All over the world, humans independently decided that grass seeds were worth restructuring their entire existence around. And once we committed to grain, there was no going back. Hunter-gatherers work about 20 hours a week to get food. Early farmers worked 40 to 60 hours. Their health actually got worse initially, shorter stature, more disease, dental problems from all that starch. But they had one massive advantage: they could support way more people. A hunter-gatherer lifestyle can support maybe one person per square mile. Grain agriculture, try 100 people in the same space. Population exploded, and with more people came specialization. Not everyone had to farm. You could have dedicated bakers, soldiers, artists, priests. You could have civilization, all because someone's lunch got too close to the fire. Alright, let's get nerdy for a minute, because the science of bread is actually insane. You know that smell when bread is baking? That warm, yeasty, slightly sweet smell that makes you want to faceplant into a bakery window. There's a reason that smell is irresistible to literally every human on Earth, and it goes back to our caveman brains. It's called the Maillard reaction, and it's basically molecular magic. When you heat proteins and sugars together, which is exactly what happens when you bake bread, they start doing this crazy chemical dance. New compounds form. Flavors that didn't exist before suddenly appear. That brown crust on bread, that's hundreds of different chemical compounds that weren't there before you started baking. We're talking about things like 2-acetyl-1-pyrroline, which gives that roasted biscuit-like smell. Maltol and isomaltol, which smells sweet and caramel-like. Furfural, which smells nutty. 2003-butanedione, which is literally butter flavor. Your nose is detecting dozens of these compounds simultaneously, and your brain is putting them together into bread. Eat this now. And our brains love this, like evolutionarily programmed to love it. Because cooked food means safe food. It means easy to digest calories. That bread smell is basically nature's way of saying, yo, this is the good stuff, eat this. But the Maillard reaction is just the opening act. The real star of the show is fermentation. Some absolute legend, and we'll never know who, discovered that if you leave your grain paste sitting around for a while, it starts to bubble. Today we know that's wild yeast in the air, eating the sugars and farting out CO2. But imagine discovering this with zero knowledge of microbiology. Your food is moving, by itself. It's alive, it's breathing. In any rational world, you'd throw that possessed devil paste away and never speak of it again. Maybe burn the whole hut down just to be safe. But somebody, some brave, hungry, possibly drunk individual, decided to cook it anyway. And it was better. The bread was lighter, fluffier, easier to digest, and had this complex tangy flavor. It also lasted longer and was less likely to grow mold. The alcohol that the yeast produces actually acts as a natural preservative. Plus, it probably gave you a tiny buzz if you ate enough of it fresh. This is probably how beer was discovered too, by the way. Same process, more water, which means civilization is basically built on grain water that we let rot in very specific ways. Sometimes we eat it, sometimes we drink it, sometimes we do both, and call it breakfast. Humanity is so weird, but let me blow your mind with how complex fermentation really is. It's not just yeast. There are hundreds of different microorganisms involved in bread fermentation. Lactobacillus bacteria produce lactic acid, which gives sourdough its tang. Acetobacter makes acetic acid. That's vinegar. Different strains produce different flavors, different textures, different nutritional profiles. San Francisco sourdough has a specific bacteria called Lactobacillus sanfrancisensis that literally doesn't exist anywhere else. The fog, the temperature, the humidity, they all create perfect conditions for this one specific microbe. You can take San Francisco sourdough starter to New York, and within a few generations, the local microbes take over and it becomes New York sourdough. Your bread is literally flavored by the air you live in. How cool is that? But the fermentation discovery is crucial for another reason: nutrition. See, grains contain phytic acid, which binds to minerals and makes them hard for your body to absorb. You could eat wheat all day and still be mineral deficient. Fermentation breaks down the phytic acid. It also pre-digests some of the proteins and creates B vitamins that weren't there before. Unfermented grain is just calories. Fermented bread is a nutritional powerhouse. It's a complete game changer for human health and development. And here's something that'll really bake your noodle: gluten. The protein everyone loves to hate these days? Fermentation breaks it down too. Traditional long-fermented sourdough is often tolerable for people who can't handle modern commercial bread. We're not gluten intolerant, we're impatience intolerant. We stopped giving bread time to become digestible. The temperature matters too. Cooler fermentation produces more complex flavors. Warmer fermentation happens faster, but tastes simpler. The amount of water changes the crumb structure. More water equals bigger holes. Less water means tighter crumb. The type of flour changes everything. Protein content, ash content, extraction rate, it all matters. Professional bakers talk about bread like winemakers talk about wine. They discuss terroir, how the soil where the wheat grew affects flavor. They age their flour like cheese. They maintain sourdough starters that are hundreds of years old, passing them down through generations like family heirlooms. This isn't just food, it's edible chemistry, biology, and art all rolled into one. This is where things get really interesting, because once humans figured out the basic bread formula, grain plus water plus heat equals food, every culture ran with it in completely different directions. And I mean completely different. Let's start with Egypt, because the Egyptians were absolutely obsessed with bread. They had over 40 different types. 40! They had bread for rich people, bread for poor people, bread for dead people. Seriously, they buried it in tombs. Bread shaped like animals, sweetened bread, savory bread. They paid wages in bread. The workers who built the pyramids paid in bread and beer. That's right, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world was built by drunk, carb-loaded construction workers. The Egyptians were also probably the first to really nail leavened bread. They had these massive bread factories where they were cranking out thousands of loaves a day. We've found hieroglyphs that are basically ancient bread recipes. They were doing sourdough starters 5,000 years ago. They had a god of bread, Nepa. They took bread so seriously they gave it its own deity. Egyptian bakers were rock stars. They had titles like Royal Chief Baker and got buried with fancy bread-making equipment. We've found ancient Egyptian bread that's 4,500 years old. It's basically a rock now, but it's bread-shaped rock, and that's what counts. Meanwhile, over in Mesoamerica, people are working with a completely different grain, corn. Now, corn is tricky. You can't just grind it up and make bread like you can with wheat. The nutrients are locked up. If you try to live on regular corn, you'll get pellagra, a nasty disease that makes you go insane and then die. Fun times. So these genius Mesoamericans figured out that if you soak corn in alkaline water, usually with limestone or ash, it releases the nutrients. This process, called nixtamalization, try saying that 5 times fast, turns corn into something you can actually live on. It increases the calcium content by 750%, makes niacin available, improves the protein quality, and makes it taste better. And that's how you get tortillas, which, let's be honest, are just really flat bread. But the process to get there is completely different from anything happening in Europe or Africa. It's convergent evolution in food form. Speaking of Africa, let's talk about injera. Ethiopian injera is made from teff, which is this tiny grain that most of the world has never heard of. Each teff grain is about 1/150th the size of wheat kernels. It's so small that you can't separate the bran from the germ, so it's always whole grain. Injera ferments for up to 5 days until it's sour and bubbly. Then it's cooked on a clay plate over a fire. The result is this spongy, sour flatbread that works like both a plate and an eating utensil. You literally eat your plate. It's genius. The fermentation is wild too. It's not yeast doing most of the work. It's bacteria. The same kind that makes yogurt. The long fermentation makes it incredibly nutritious and gives it natural preservative properties in the Ethiopian highlands where refrigeration wasn't a thing. It's perfectly adapted to its environment. Or look at Iceland, where they came up with rugbrauð, volcano bread. I'm not making this up. They literally bury pots of rye bread dough in the ground near hot springs and let geothermal heat cook it for 24 hours. Because when you live on a volcanic island with barely any trees for firewood, you get creative. The earth becomes your oven. The bread comes out dense, sweet, and dark brown, almost like cake. The long, slow cooking caramelizes the sugars in the rye. It's traditionally eaten with butter and smoked fish, because Iceland doesn't do anything halfway. Then there's Armenia, which has lavash, this paper-thin bread that's slapped onto the walls of underground clay ovens called taniers. It cooks in literally 30 seconds and can be dried and stored for months, then rehydrated when you need it. It's basically ancient instant bread. Armenian families used to make hundreds of sheets at once and stack them up for the winter. UNESCO actually recognized lavash as an intangible cultural heritage. That's right, this bread is so important, it's officially protected by international law. The Chinese went a completely different direction and started steaming their bread instead of baking it. Mantou and baozi are technically bread, just cooked with steam. This probably developed because ovens require a lot of fuel, but steaming is super efficient. You can stack multiple layers of bread in bamboo steamers and cook them all at once with minimal energy. The texture is completely different from baked bread. Soft, springy, slightly chewy, no crust at all. It's like bread that never quite grew up, in the best possible way. And then there's the weird stuff. The Aussies have damper, bread designed to be made by people who have absolutely nothing. Flour, water, salt, cooked in coals. That's it. It was Bushman bread, designed to be made on the go with minimal equipment. It's basically camping bread that became a cultural icon. Finnish people make bread with blood. Yep, blood. It's called mustamakara, and they add pig or cow blood to the dough. The blood acts as a binding agent and adds iron and protein. It's metal as hell, and surprisingly delicious. Every single one of these breads tells a story. They're edible history books, encoding thousands of years of cultural knowledge in every bite. Here's something your history teacher probably didn't tell you. Every great empire was built on bread. I'm completely serious. Rome, bread empire. Egypt, bread empire. The British Empire, powered by bread. Even the Mongols, who were all about that nomadic life, adopted bread making once they conquered agricultural societies. Let's talk about Rome, because the Romans took bread to a whole other level of political importance. They had a phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses. That was literally their formula for keeping the population under control. Feed them and entertain them. By 100 AD, Rome was distributing free bread to 200,000 citizens every single day. Think about the logistics of that. The grain ships from Egypt and North Africa, the mills, the bakeries, the distribution centers. The entire economy of the Mediterranean was basically organized around getting grain to Rome to make bread. They had a whole government department just for bread, the Praefectus Anane. This guy's entire job was making sure Rome had bread. If he screwed up, the city rioted. No pressure. Roman bakers were so important, they couldn't leave the profession. Once a baker, always a baker. Your kids had to be bakers too. It was hereditary, like being nobility but with more flour. They had their own guild, their own courts, their own senators. Bakers were basically a parallel government. When that system broke down, Rome fell. It's that simple. The barbarian invasions? Secondary. The real killer was when the grain ships stopped coming. No bread, no Rome. But it's not just about feeding people. Bread is power, because whoever controls the grain controls everything. Medieval lords didn't just own the land, they owned the mills. Peasants were legally required to grind their grain at the lord's mill and pay for the privilege. The lord controlled when you could make bread, how much it cost you, and took a cut of your grain as payment. That's institutional control over the most basic necessity of life. And it gets darker. Lords would sometimes sabotage hand mills, called querns, to force people to use their mills. In some places, owning a hand mill was illegal. Imagine making it illegal to make your own food. That's how powerful bread control was. The Catholic Church figured this out too. They didn't just give spiritual bread in communion. They owned massive amounts of farmland and controlled bread production across Europe. Monasteries were basically bread factories with a side of prayer. The church tithe, usually paid in grain. They had a monopoly on both earthly and heavenly bread. And when bread supplies failed, revolution. The French Revolution started with bread riots. Marie Antoinette probably never actually said let them eat cake, but the fact that everyone believes she did tells you everything about how central bread was to the conflict. The price of bread in Paris had hit 88% of a worker's daily wage. When you can't afford bread, heads literally roll. The sans-culottes, the radical revolutionaries, their symbol was a red cap and a loaf of bread on a pike, not a flag, not a weapon. Bread. That's how symbolically powerful it was. The Russian Revolution started with bread riots in St. Petersburg. International Women's Day 1917 turned into a bread march, which turned into a revolution, which brought down a 300-year-old dynasty, all because of bread. The Arab Spring, triggered by wheat prices. Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, all major wheat importers. When global wheat prices doubled in 2010-2011, governments fell like dominoes. Even today, governments subsidize bread because they know what happens when people can't afford it. Egypt spends billions keeping bread at 5 cents a loaf. They lose money on every piece, but it's cheaper than revolution. In Iran, touching bread prices is political suicide. Jordan nearly had riots in 2018 when they tried to reduce bread subsidies. Bread is never just about food, it's about survival, power, and control, but it's also about identity. During World War I, Americans renamed German foods because of anti-German sentiment. Sauerkraut became Liberty cabbage. Hamburg steak became Salisbury steak. But they couldn't rename bread. It was too fundamental, so they just pretended rye bread wasn't German. The Soviets tried to create communist bread, unified bread that would be the same everywhere, erasing regional differences. It failed miserably. People wanted their local bread. In the Baltic states, continuing to make traditional black bread became an act of resistance. During the Irish potato famine, the British government imported corn, maize to feed the starving Irish. But they didn't know about nixtamalization. The corn wasn't processed right, so it didn't provide proper nutrition. People ate it, and still died of malnutrition. The knowledge of how to make proper bread from corn could have saved thousands of lives. In World War II, Britain created the national loaf, a standardized whole wheat bread that used less imported wheat. People hated it. It was grey, heavy, and tasted like disappointment. Churchill called it Hitler's secret weapon, but it kept Britain fed during submarine warfare. Japan's entire modernization can be tracked through bread. In 1543, Portuguese traders introduced bread to Japan. The Japanese word for bread, pan, comes from Portuguese. By 1874, they were making an pan, bread filled with sweet red bean paste, taking Western technology and making it Japanese. Today, Japan has one of the most innovative bread cultures in the world, from isolation to bread innovation in 1550 years. Can we just acknowledge how weird it is that humans eat grass? Like, really think about it. Every other primate is out there eating fruits, leaves, insects, maybe some meat. And we're over here like, nah, I'm gonna cultivate grass, selectively breed it for thousands of years, build entire civilizations around it, and make it the foundation of my diet. It's completely insane. And our bodies literally evolved to handle this weird diet. Your jaw, it got smaller because bread doesn't require the massive grinding teeth our ancestors needed. Look at a chimp skull versus a human skull. Their jaw muscles are massive, ours are tiny. We outsourced our chewing to millstones and cooking. Your gut, it's shortened because cooked fermented grains are way easier to digest than raw plant matter. Gorillas have huge bellies because they need long intestines to ferment plant matter. We have relatively tiny guts because we're doing the fermentation outside our bodies in bread dough. Your brain, it got bigger, partly because the reliable calories from grain agriculture freed up energy for brain development. The expensive tissue hypothesis suggests that as our guts shrank, our brains could grow. The energy we saved on digestion went straight to thinking. We even evolved extra copies of the amylase gene. That's the enzyme that breaks down starch. Most mammals have 1 or 2 copies. Humans who come from agricultural societies can have up to 20 copies. We are literally genetically optimized for eating bread. This happened fast. Evolutionarily speaking, agriculture is only 10,000 years old. That's 500 generations. Evolution usually takes millions of years, but bread was such a massive advantage that our bodies fast-tracked the adaptations. European populations developed lactase persistence around the same time, the ability to digest milk as adults, bread and cheese, the original combo meal. These populations were basically genetically engineering themselves to handle agricultural foods better, but it goes deeper than that. There's this thing called the thrifty gene hypothesis. Basically, humans who could efficiently store calories from grain as fat were more likely to survive famines, so we evolved to be really good at turning bread into body fat, which was great when famines were common, not so great now when there's a bakery on every corner. This is why low-carb diets work, by the way. You're basically tricking your body into thinking there's a famine and switching to backup power mode, but your body really wants those grain calories. That's why bread cravings are so intense. Millions of years of evolution are screaming at you to eat that baguette. And the gluten thing. Celiac disease is real and serious for about 1% of the population, but the fact that 99% of us can eat gluten just fine shows how adapted we are to grain consumption. We've been eating gluten for at least 10,000 years. That's long enough for significant evolutionary adaptation. But here's where it gets really weird. Bread might have shaped our social evolution too. You need farmers to grow the grain, millers to grind it, bakers to bake it. You need storage facilities, distribution networks, and some form of economy to trade it. A hunter-gatherer can go get food alone. Bread requires a village. Literally, this forced cooperation might have driven the evolution of human social behavior. We had to learn to work together, trust strangers, delay gratification, and plan for the future. All bread-related requirements. Language might have evolved partially because of agriculture. You need complex communication to coordinate farming, to teach bread-making techniques, to negotiate grain trades. The vocabulary around bread and grain is some of the oldest in every language. Some anthropologists think bread might have driven the development of human society more than any other factor. The need to protect grain stores led to permanent settlements. Permanent settlements led to property ownership. Property ownership led to laws. Laws led to government. Government led to civilization. We literally have a bread pathway in our brains. Carbohydrate consumption triggers serotonin production. Serotonin makes us calm and social. Bread makes us better at being around other humans. We're biochemically programmed to be more civilized when we eat bread. There's even evidence that bread affected our sexual evolution. Agricultural societies could support more children because grain provides reliable weaning foods. Hunter-gatherer women typically have children 4 years apart. Agricultural women can have them every 2 years. Bread literally made us more fertile, all because some caveman decided to eat grass. Okay, we need to talk about what happened to bread in the last 150 years, because we took this perfect food that sustained humanity for millennia, and, well, we kind of messed it up. It started innocently enough. In the 1800s, cities were exploding. London went from 1 million people in 1800 to 6.5 million by 1900. Suddenly you had millions of people who needed bread but didn't have time or space to make it themselves. So bakeries industrialized. The first victim was time. Traditional bread making takes 12 to 24 hours. Most of that is fermentation. Slow, natural, can't be rushed fermentation. But capitalism doesn't have time for that. So bakers started adding more yeast. Then they added sugar to feed the yeast. Then they cranked up the temperature to make it work faster. By 1850, you could make bread in 4 hours. It was puffy, white, and tasteless, but hey, it was fast. Then came roller mills. For thousands of years, we ground grain between stones. Stone milling crushes everything together. The bran, the germ, the endosperm. It makes whole grain flour whether you want it or not. But in 1865, someone in Budapest figured out you could use steel rollers to crack wheat open and separate the parts. The bran and germ, where all the vitamins and oils are, could be removed completely. What's left is pure white starch. White flour was a miracle. It lasted forever because there were no oils to go rancid. It baked up light and fluffy. It looked clean and pure. Rich people had always eaten white bread, and now everyone could afford it. It was also nutritionally garbage. See, all the vitamins, minerals and fiber in grain are in the bran and germ, the parts we were now throwing away. White bread was basically pure starch. People started getting diseases like pellagra and beriberi, malnutrition diseases, from eating too much bread. That's how stripped of nutrition it was. The solution? In the 1940s, governments started requiring enriched flour. They added back some of the vitamins they'd removed. Not all of them, mind you, just enough to prevent obvious diseases. It's like stealing someone's wallet and giving them back bus fare. But the real tragedy came in 1961 with the Corleywood process. This is a method of making bread that uses intense mechanical mixing, chemical additives, and lots of yeast to go from flour to finished loaf in about 3 hours. Traditional bread takes 12 to 24 hours. All that time is fermentation, which develops flavor, breaks down gluten, makes nutrients available, and creates natural preservatives. The Corleywood process skips all that. It's bread without soul. They add enzymes to make it soft, emulsifiers to make it last, soy flour to make it white, vitamin C to strengthen the gluten, vinegar to fake the sourdough tang. It's not bread, it's an industrial product that looks like bread, and we fell for it. By 1965, 80% of UK bread was made this way. Today it's 98%. The US, Canada, Australia, they all adopted similar methods. Real bread became artisan bread, a luxury product. That's why modern supermarket bread is sweet, fluffy, and tasteless. It's why it molds in 3 days, but never actually goes stale. It's why so many people think they're gluten intolerant when they might just be reacting to unfermented, chemically processed bread. We even invented pre-sliced bread in 19... Otto Rohwedder's bread slicing machine was initially a flop. Nobody wanted it. Bakers thought sliced bread would go stale too fast, But then Wonder Bread started selling pre-sliced loaves in 1930, and it changed everything. Pre-sliced bread seems convenient, but it was really about selling more bread. Sliced bread goes stale faster, so you have to buy more often. It's easier to eat more slices when they're already cut. Kids could make their own sandwiches, consuming more bread. It was genius marketing disguised as convenience. The saddest part, we've forgotten what real bread tastes like. Most people have never had actual sourdough, not the fake stuff with added vinegar, but real, long-fermented sourdough. They've never had bread made from freshly milled whole grains. They don't know that bread can be a complete meal, not just a vehicle for sandwich fillings. We turned bread from the staff of life into empty calories, and then we wonder why everyone's unhealthy. But here's the good news, there's a bread revolution happening. It started in the 1970s with hippies and health food stores. Whole grain bread came back. Then in the 1990s, artisan bakeries started popping up. People rediscovered sourdough starters. The internet let people share ancient techniques and recipes. COVID was a turning point. Suddenly, everyone was stuck at home with time on their hands. Sourdough starters sold out everywhere. People who'd never baked anything were nurturing starters like pets, giving them names, sharing them with neighbors. It wasn't just boredom. It was people reconnecting with something primal, the need to create, to nurture something living, to provide for yourself and others. It was bread as therapy, as meditation, as connection to our ancestors. Now farmers' markets have real bread again. Ancient grains like einkorn and emmer are making a comeback. Small mills are stone grinding local wheat. Bakeries are fermenting for 48, 72, even 96 hours. We're slowly remembering what our ancestors knew. Good bread takes time. It takes skill. It takes respect for the process. You can't rush fermentation. You can't fake the complex flavors that develop over time. You can't industrialize the soul out of bread and expect it to still nourish you. Every culture doesn't just have bread. They have bread rules, bread traditions, bread superstitions. Bread is so fundamental that it's literally baked into our cultural DNA. In Judaism, challah isn't just bread, it's a religious obligation. The braiding represents unity. You tear it, never cut it, to preserve its wholeness. During Passover, bread is literally forbidden, and eating unleavened matzo reminds Jews of the Exodus from Egypt. The absence of bread becomes as meaningful as its presence. There's even a blessing specifically for bread, the hamotzi. It's not just thanks for the food, it's acknowledging bread as a divine gift. And get this, in Jewish law, any meal that includes bread requires a special grace after meals. Bread literally changes the spiritual significance of eating. In Greek Orthodox tradition, bread is blessed and stamped with religious symbols. The stamp says ICXC Nika, Jesus Christ conquers. This isn't just decoration. That bread is now holy. Throwing away blessed bread is a sin. You have to kiss it if you drop it. Old bread is fed to birds or burned, never thrown in the trash. Russians have a tradition called bread and salt for greeting guests. It's such a big deal that they do it for visiting heads of state. The bread represents prosperity. The salt represents protection from evil. Refusing it is a massive insult, like international incident-level insult. There's a Russian saying, bread is the head of everything. They have hundreds of bread proverbs. During the siege of Leningrad, people got 125 grams of bread per day, made with sawdust and wallpaper paste. They still called it bread. They still treasured every crumb. In Germany, there are over 3,000 types of bread, and they take it seriously, like seriously. There's a word, Abendbrot, that literally means evening bread, but actually means dinner. German culture is so bread-centric that they have bread sommeliers. That's a real job. People who professionally taste and evaluate bread. Germans have bread rules too. You don't wish someone guten Appetit until everyone has bread. Cutting bread unevenly brings bad luck. And walking past a bakery without acknowledging the smell. That's just rude. France legally defines what can be called a baguette. By law, a traditional baguette can only contain flour, water, yeast and salt. Nothing else. No preservatives, no additives, no shortcuts. The French are so serious about bread that they have competitions for the best baguette in Paris, and the winner gets to supply the French president for a year. There's a French bread law from 1993 that regulates when bakers can go on vacation. Not even kidding. They have to coordinate with other bakers to ensure the neighborhood always has fresh bread. The government literally schedules bread availability. In Japan, bread pan isn't traditional, but they've made it their own. Japanese milk bread, shokupan, is impossibly fluffy and slightly sweet. They have curry bread, melon bread, bread filled with everything from red bean paste to spaghetti. They took a foreign food and made it completely Japanese. There's a Japanese saying, if you eat bread for breakfast, you'll have a Western day. It's this idea that bread fundamentally changes your mindset. Rice is Japanese. Bread is international. Your breakfast carb determines your cultural mode for the day. Mexico has Day of the Dead bread, Pan de Muerto, that's only made for one holiday. It's shaped to represent bones and skulls, honoring the deceased. It's sweet, flavored with orange and anise, and completely different from everyday bread. The bread itself becomes a ritual object. In some Mexican communities, you can't throw away even a crumb of bread. It's disrespectful to the grain, to the baker, to God. Stale bread gets turned into pudding, French toast, breadcrumbs, anything but the trash. Turkey has a belief that bread contains the soul of the wheat. Stepping on bread brings bad luck. If you see bread on the ground, you pick it up, kiss it, touch it to your forehead, and place it somewhere high where it won't be stepped on. It's that sacred. Turkish bakers leave a basket outside for day-old bread. It's not for sale. It's free for anyone who needs it. There's no shame in taking it. It's considered a community service, a religious duty even. Afghanistan has communal bread ovens called tannoors. Entire neighborhoods share one oven. You bring your dough, marked with your family's pattern, and the tannoor keeper bakes it for you. It's community building through bread. Your daily bread literally connects you to your neighbors. In many Afghan communities, bread is so respected that it has its own place at the table, a special cloth just for bread. You never place bread upside down. You never put anything on top of bread. It's treated almost like a family member. Iceland has a Christmas tradition called jólabrauð, Christmas bread, where families make intricate, paper-thin flatbreads with beautiful patterns cut into them. Each family has their own patterns, passed down through generations. It's edible art that connects you to your ancestors. These aren't just quaint traditions. They're evidence of how deeply bread is woven into human culture. We don't just eat bread. We celebrate with it, mourn with it, pray with it, connect through it. Bread is the edible expression of civilization itself. Let's get into the neuroscience, because your brain on bread is absolutely wild. When you eat bread, your brain lights up like a pinball machine. The reward centers go crazy. Dopamine floods your system. It's the same response as drugs, sex, or winning money. Bread is literally addictive, and there's evolutionary reasoning behind it. First, let's talk about the dopamine hit. Dopamine isn't actually about pleasure. It's about motivation and reward seeking. Your brain releases dopamine when it thinks something important for survival is about to happen. And for 99% of human history, finding carbohydrate-rich food was survival. In nature, carbs are rare and seasonal. Fruits ripen once a year. Honey requires fighting bees. Root vegetables require digging. When our ancestors found carbs, they needed to be motivated to eat as much as possible and remember where they found them. That's dopamine's job. Then we invented bread, concentrated carbs available every single day. We basically hacked our own reward system. It's like we invented a dopamine button we can push whenever we want. But wait, there's more. Carbohydrates trigger serotonin production. That's the happiness and calm chemical. This isn't just about feeling good. Serotonin is crucial for social bonding. When we eat bread together, we literally become biochemically primed to like each other more. This is why every culture has breaking bread as a peacemaking ritual. It's not symbolic, it's neurochemical. Eating bread together makes us more trusting, more cooperative, more social. We're drugging ourselves into civilization with every sandwich. The smell factor is insane too. The smell of baking bread triggers the limbic system. That's the ancient part of your brain that deals with emotion and memory. It bypasses your conscious thought and goes straight to your feelings. That's why bread smells like home, comfort, and safety to basically everyone. Your brain associates that smell with survival, community, and abundance. Studies show that the smell of baking bread makes people kinder, more helpful, and more likely to trust strangers. Real estate agents literally bake bread during open houses because it makes people want to buy the house. That's not manipulation, that's neuroscience. There's also something called the cephalic phase response. When you see or smell bread, your body starts producing digestive enzymes before you even take a bite. Your mouth waters, your stomach prepares, insulin starts releasing. Your entire digestive system gears up just from the sight of a dinner roll. This response is stronger for bread than almost any other food. Show someone a picture of bread, and their insulin levels actually change. Their body is so ready for bread that it starts digesting it before it even exists in their mouth. And then there's the texture thing. Humans are texture obsessed when it comes to food, and bread has the perfect combination. That crispy crust that gives way to soft interior, that's hitting multiple sensory rewards at once. The crunch satisfies our evolutionary need for texture variety. In nature, varied texture usually meant varied nutrients. The soft inside is easy to chew and digest, signaling safe food to our primitive brain. The contrast between crust and crumb creates what food scientists call dynamic contrast, one of the most powerful triggers for food pleasure. The chewing itself is important too. Bread requires just enough chewing to be satisfying but not exhausting. It releases flavors slowly as you chew. The starches start breaking down into sugars in your mouth, so bread literally gets sweeter as you chew it. That's not happening by accident. That's millions of years of coevolution between humans and grain. Your brain actually tracks how much you chew and uses that to determine satiation. Bread hits the sweet spot, enough chewing to feel substantial, not so much that it's work. That's why liquid calories don't satisfy us the same way. No chewing, no satisfaction signal. But here's the really crazy part. Different types of bread affect your brain differently. White bread causes a rapid blood sugar spike. Your brain gets flooded with glucose, triggering a massive dopamine release. But then comes the crash. Blood sugar drops, energy plummets, and your brain starts craving more bread to get back to that high. It's literally a drug cycle. Sourdough bread, with its slower glucose release, gives you steady energy without the crash. The fermentation creates compounds that affect neurotransmitter production differently. You get the satisfaction without the addiction cycle. Whole grain bread, with all its fiber and nutrients, triggers different hormonal responses. It activates GLP-1 and PYY, hormones that tell your brain you're full. Ultra-processed white bread doesn't trigger those same hormones, which is why you can eat half a baguette and still feel hungry. We've basically created a spectrum from bread that works with your biology to bread that hijacks your biology, and your brain knows the difference, even if you don't consciously realize it. There's even evidence that your gut bacteria influence your bread cravings. The bacteria that thrive on simple carbs actually produce compounds that make you crave more simple carbs. They're basically hijacking your brain to feed themselves. When you eat fermented bread with complex carbs, you feed different bacteria that don't manipulate your cravings the same way. So when you say you're addicted to bread, you're not being dramatic, you're being scientifically accurate. Let's talk about the weird stuff. The bread facts that make you go, wait, what? First off, bread can get you drunk. Not bread that's been turned into beer, actual bread. Fresh bread contains up to 2% alcohol from fermentation. Eat enough warm, fresh bread on an empty stomach, and you can actually get a tiny buzz. There are documented cases of people failing breathalyzers from eating too much fresh bread. The ancient Egyptians used moldy bread as antibiotics. They'd deliberately let bread grow mold and apply it to wounds. It worked because bread mold produces penicillin. They were literally doing antibiotic treatment 3,000 years before we discovered penicillin. Speaking of Egypt, we can still decode their bread. Scientists have extracted yeast from ancient Egyptian pottery and baked bread with it. We're literally eating the same organism that fed the pyramid builders. That yeast has been asleep for 4,500 years, and it still works perfectly. The Great Fire of London in 1666 started in a bakery. Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane, to be exact. A spark from the bread oven started a fire that destroyed 13,200 houses and 87 churches. Bread literally burned down London. In medieval times, bakers who cheated customers were punished by being dragged through the streets with the underweight loaf tied around their neck. That's where the term baker's dozen comes from. Bakers would add an extra item to make absolutely sure they weren't underweight. There's a bread that's been continuously baking for over 100 years. The Boudin Bakery in San Francisco has been using the same sourdough starter since 1849. It survived the 1906 earthquake because the baker's wife saved the starter instead of grabbing valuables. That starter has been fed every single day for 175 years. Bread was once used as an eraser. Before rubber erasers, people used rolled-up white bread to erase pencil marks. It actually works really well. Artists still sometimes use it for delicate erasing work. The sandwich was invented because of gambling. The Earl of Sandwich didn't want to leave the card table to eat, so he had meat put between bread slices so he could eat with one hand and gamble with the other. Bread enabled the first working lunch. There's a type of bread in Sardinia that's linked to extreme longevity. Pan carasso is a traditional flatbread that the island's centenarians eat daily. Sardinia has 10 times more centenarians per capita than the US. Scientists think the bread's fermentation process might be part of why. The phrase upper crust, meaning wealthy people, comes from bread. The upper crust of bread was considered the best part, so it went to the lord of the manor. Servants got the burned bottom. Social hierarchy was literally baked into dinner. Wonder Bread was once illegal. During World War II, sliced bread was banned in America for 3 months to save wax paper for the war effort. The public outcry was so intense they reversed the ban. Americans chose convenience over patriotism. Pumpernickel means farting gobbling. Seriously, it comes from German pumpen, to fart, and nickel, a goblin or devil. The bread was considered so hard to digest that it made you fart like the devil. Germans are nothing if not direct. There's a museum in Germany dedicated entirely to bread. The Museum of Bread Culture in Ulm has over 18,000 objects related to bread. There are bread paintings, bread stamps, bread poems, bread everything. It's 6 floors of pure bread obsession. The most expensive bread in the world costs $25 per loaf. It's made by Harrods in London with gold leaf and champagne, which completely misses the point of bread, but rich people go richer. The problem: crumbs. In zero gravity, breadcrumbs float around and can get into equipment or astronauts' eyes. They've tried everything: tablets, pouches, coatings. Currently, astronauts eat tortillas instead of bread because they don't crumb. There's a town in Italy where bread is illegal to sell. In Altamora, you can only sell bread made in Altamora. It's legally protected like champagne. The bread has been made the same way since the 1300s, with specific wheat, water, and methods. It's so good that people drive hours just to buy it. Bread has been used to divine the future. Alphitomancy was divination using barley bread. Accused people would eat special bread. Innocent people could digest it. Guilty people would get sick. It was basically a supernatural lie detector test. The Subway bread legally isn't bread in Ireland. In 2020, Ireland's Supreme Court ruled that Subway's bread contains too much sugar to be classified as bread for tax purposes. It's legally cake. Cake sandwiches, everyone. So where does bread go from here? Because make no mistake, bread isn't done evolving. First, let's talk about climate change, because it's going to fundamentally change bread. Wheat doesn't like heat. The ideal temperature for wheat is 15 to 20 degrees. Every degree above that reduces yield by 3 to 4%. We're looking at potential 25% reduction in wheat yields by 2050. Traditional wheat-growing regions are becoming unsuitable. The American Midwest, the European wheat belt, the Australian plains, they're all getting too hot, too dry, or too unpredictable. We're either going to have to move wheat production toward the poles, engineer heat-resistant wheat, or switch to different grains entirely. Ancient grains are making a comeback, partly for this reason. Einkorn, emmer, spelt, kamut. These older wheats are often more resilient than modern wheat. They're more nutritious too. We bred modern wheat for yield and gluten content, not nutrition or flavor. These ancient grains are like the heirloom tomatoes of the bread world. But we're also looking at completely new grains. Kernza is a perennial wheat that doesn't need replanting every year. It has roots that go down 10 feet, making it drought-resistant and carbon sequestering. It could revolutionize agriculture, but it makes denser bread. We're literally relearning how to bake. There's also serious research into alternative flours. Crickets, anyone. Cricket flour has complete proteins, B vitamins, and uses 2,000 times less water than beef for the same amount of protein. Mix it with regular flour, and you've got high-protein bread that could help solve world hunger, if we can get over the ick factor. Lab-grown flour is also a thing now. Scientists are growing wheat cells in bioreactors, no fields required. It sounds dystopian, but it could mean fresh bread in space colonies, or underground bunkers, or anywhere traditional agriculture doesn't work. Imagine bread that's never seen sunlight. The sourdough revival is part of a bigger trend toward fermented foods and gut health. We're discovering that the microbiome in fermented bread might be as important as the nutrients. Some bakeries are experimenting with specific bacterial cultures, basically designing probiotic bread. Your morning toast could literally be medicine. There's also the personalization trend. Companies are working on bread tailored to your individual genetics and gut microbiome. They analyze your DNA, your gut bacteria, your blood sugar responses, and create bread optimized for your specific body. Diabetic? Here's bread that won't spike your blood sugar. Celiac? Here's bread with broken down gluten proteins. Athletic? Extra protein and complex carbs. It's bread as precision nutrition. 3D printed bread is already here. NASA's working on it for space missions. You can print bread in any shape, with ingredients distributed exactly where you want them. Want a gradient from whole wheat to white in a single slice? Done. Bread that's crusty on one side and soft on the other? Easy. Nutrients concentrated in specific areas? No problem. But it goes beyond just printing. We're talking about programmable bread. Bread with time-release nutrients. Bread that changes flavor as you chew it. Bread that could theoretically deliver medication. It's bread freed from the constraints of traditional baking. Vertical farming is going to change bread too. Growing wheat in climate-controlled towers, stacked 30 stories high, in the middle of cities. No weather problems. No pests. No transport costs. Fresh local flour year-round. Some vertical farms are already growing wheat with 300 times the yield per square foot of traditional farming, but the biggest change might be cultural. We're in this weird moment where bread is both demonized, low-carb diets, and celebrated, artisan bakeries. People are both more disconnected from bread making than ever. Most have never baked bread, and more interested in it. Sourdough starter sales went insane during COVID. The pandemic sourdough trend wasn't just boredom. It was people reconnecting with something primal, the need to create, to nurture something living, starter, to provide for yourself and others. It was bread as therapy, as meditation, as connection to our ancestors. And maybe that's the future, not replacing traditional bread, but remembering why it mattered. Bread as slow food in a fast world. Bread as community in an isolated world. Bread as real in a digital world. We're seeing bread libraries where people preserve heritage grain varieties. Bread CSAs where you subscribe to a baker like you would a farm. Bread tours where people travel specifically to taste regional breads. Bread is becoming both more scientific and more artisanal at the same time. There's even bread activism. People fighting against industrial bread, against genetic modification, against the loss of bread culture. The Real Bread campaign in the UK has thousands of members fighting for traditional bread making. They're literally bread revolutionaries. So here we are, after 10,000 years of bread evolution, and we can finally answer our original question. Why does every culture have bread? It's not just one reason, it's everything. Bread exists everywhere because grain is efficient. One wheat plant produces way more calories than one carrot plant. You can store grain for years. You can grow it in massive quantities. It's simply the most efficient way to turn sunlight into human food. Bread exists everywhere because cooking is human. We're the only species that cooks, and bread is cooking taken to its logical conclusion. It's not just heated food, it's transformed food. It's chemistry and biology and physics all working together to turn inedible grass into the foundation of civilization. Bread exists everywhere because fermentation is magic. Every culture discovered fermentation independently because wild yeast is literally everywhere. Leave grain and water sitting around anywhere on Earth, and bread will try to happen. The microbes that make bread possible are universal. Bread exists everywhere because humans are social. Bread requires cooperation, planning, and community. It creates gathering places, mills, bakeries, markets. It gives us something to share, to trade, to bond over. Breaking bread together isn't just a phrase, it's a fundamental human activity. Bread exists everywhere because our bodies evolved for it. We have the teeth for it, the enzymes for it, the gut bacteria for it. We're literally built to eat bread. Our ancestors who couldn't handle grains didn't become our ancestors. Bread exists everywhere because it's versatile. Every culture could take their local grain, wheat, rice, corn, teff, whatever, and turn it into their version of bread. It's infinitely adaptable while still being fundamentally the same thing. But most importantly, bread exists everywhere because humans need more than just calories. We need comfort, tradition, connection, and meaning. Bread provides all of that. It's the taste of home, the smell of safety, the foundation of hospitality. It's currency and commodity and sacrament all at once. When you really think about it, bread might be the most human thing we've ever created. It requires us to plan for the future, growing grain, cooperate with others, milling, baking, trading, use tools and fire, understand biology and chemistry, and transform raw nature into culture. Bread is civilization in edible form. So the next time you grab a slice of toast or tear into a fresh baguette, take a second to appreciate what you're holding. It's not just food, it's 10,000 years of human innovation. It's the reason cities exist. It's the food that built pyramids and fueled revolutions. It's the thread that connects you to every human culture that has ever existed. And that's why every culture has bread. Because bread isn't just something we make. Bread is who we are. Think about that. Every time you eat bread, you're participating in an unbroken chain of human activity stretching back to the Ice Age. The same basic process: grain, water, fermentation, heat, that fed ancient Sumerians feeds you. The sourdough starter in your kitchen is doing the same thing sourdough starters were doing in ancient Egypt. Bread is humanity's greatest hack. We took grass and turned it into the foundation of civilization. We convinced ourselves to stop wandering and settle down, just to grow grain. We invented writing to keep track of bread. We developed mathematics to calculate bread distribution. We created laws to regulate bread. We started wars over bread. We made peace over bread. Bread is so fundamental that we've literally shaped our languages around it. Companion comes from Latin, com, with, and panis, bread. A companion is literally someone you share bread with. Lord comes from Old English, hlafwid, loaf ward, the keeper of bread. Lady comes from hlafdigi, bread kneader. We are the bread species. Homo sapiens? More like Homo panis. And that's beautiful actually. In a world that often feels disconnected and digital and fake, bread is real. It's tangible. It's alive. It connects us to our ancestors, to our neighbors, to our own bodies. Every loaf is a small miracle. Every slice is a piece of history. Every crumb is sacred. That's why every culture has bread. Because we are bread culture. All of us. Alright everyone, we made it. We just traveled 10,000 years through human history, across every continent, through chemistry labs and ancient ovens, and we finally understand why bread is literally everywhere. And honestly, I'm sitting here after researching and writing this, and I'm looking at bread completely differently now. Like I made toast this morning, basic whole wheat toast with butter, and I actually stopped and thought about what I was holding. This isn't just breakfast. This is the culmination of thousands of generations of humans figuring stuff out. This is portable civilization. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. You know what really gets me? The fact that right now, as you're watching this video, someone in Paris is pulling a baguette out of an oven. Someone in India is flipping naan in a tandoor. Someone in Ethiopia is pouring injera batter. Someone in Mexico is patting out tortillas. And they're all doing essentially the same thing their ancestors did hundreds or thousands of years ago. In a world where everything changes so fast, where we've got AI writing essays and billionaires launching cars into space, and technology that would look like magic to someone from even 50 years ago, bread is still bread. The fundamentals haven't changed. Grain, water, fermentation, heat. That's it. That's the recipe that built the world. And I think there's something deeply comforting about that. Something that connects us not just to the past but to each other. Every human culture looked at their local grass and said, yeah, I can work with this. We're all doing the same thing, just with different flavors. But here's what really hit me while researching this. We take bread completely for granted. It's so common, so ordinary, so basic, that we've turned it into a metaphor for boring, plain as bread. Bread and butter issues, meaning the simple basic stuff. We use bread to mean ordinary, but there's nothing ordinary about bread. Nothing ordinary about taking something inedible and transforming it into something that can sustain entire civilizations. Nothing ordinary about a food that requires cooperation, planning, patience, and skill. Nothing ordinary about a chemical reaction that creates hundreds of flavor compounds and makes your kitchen smell like home. We've forgotten how miraculous bread actually is. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even the point. Maybe the fact that bread became so ordinary, so ubiquitous, so fundamental that we stopped thinking about it. Maybe that's the ultimate success story. It worked so well that it became invisible, but I want to challenge you to see it again. Really see it. Next time you're in a bakery, stop and watch the bakers work. Watch how they shape the dough with practiced hands. Watch how they score the loaves. Watch how they pull perfectly golden bread from the oven with the kind of confidence that only comes from doing something 1,000 times. That's not just a job. That's a craft that's been passed down through generations. That baker knows things that their great-great-great-grandparents knew. That's continuity. That's tradition. That's culture happening right in front of you. Next time you eat bread with someone, think about what you're doing. You're performing a ritual that humans have been performing since before we had cities, before we had writing, before we had most of the things we think of as civilization. Breaking bread together is literally one of the oldest human activities. It's in our DNA at this point, and it still matters. There's a reason business deals happen over lunch. There's a reason peace treaties involve shared meals. There's a reason every culture has traditions around communal eating. Bread makes us human together. And if you've never made bread yourself, oh man, you've got to try it at least once. I know it seems intimidating. I know it seems time-consuming. I know it seems like one of those things that other people do. People with sourdough starters and artisan this and heritage grain that. But here's the truth. Bread wants to happen. The yeast wants to grow. The dough wants to rise. You're not fighting against nature. You're working with it. Start simple. A basic no-knead bread. 4 ingredients. Flour, water, yeast, salt. Mix them together. Let it sit overnight. Bake it. That's it. I'm not exaggerating. That's literally the entire process. And the bread that comes out won't be fancy, won't look like a magazine cover, won't win any competitions, but it'll be your bread. Bread you made with your own hands, using the same basic process that humans have used for 10,000 years. And there's something that happens when you make your own bread. Something psychological. You start understanding why every culture treasures it. You start getting why bread is sacred in so many traditions. Because you put effort into it. You watched it transform. You waited for it. You smelled it baking. And then you taste it, still warm, and it's like nothing you've ever bought in a store. The COVID lockdown sourdough craze wasn't just boredom or a meme. It was people instinctively reaching for something real, something tangible, something that connected them to the past during a time when everything felt uncertain. Nurturing a sourdough starter, keeping something alive, feeding it, caring for it, that scratched some deep psychological itch, and then turning that into bread, into food you could share with your family, that meant something. We're living in this weird moment where we're more disconnected from our food than ever, but also more curious about it than ever. People want to know where their food comes from. They want to understand what's in it. They want to connect with it. And bread is the perfect gateway for that. It's accessible, it's forgiving, and the results are immediately rewarding. Plus, and I cannot stress this enough, your house will smell absolutely incredible when you're baking bread. Like stupid good. You'll want to bottle that smell and wear it as cologne. Your neighbors will smell it and suddenly find reasons to stop by. Oh, I just needed to borrow some bread. Can I borrow some bread? But beyond just making it yourself, I want you to seek out good bread. Real bread. Not the squishy supermarket stuff that's been through the Chorleywood process and has 17 ingredients, including things you can't pronounce. I'm talking about bread from actual bakeries, where actual humans are actually baking every day. Find a local bakery. Try their sourdough. Try their whole grain. Try their specialty loaves. Yes, it costs more. Yes, it goes stale faster. Yes, it requires you to actually plan when you're going to eat it, instead of assuming bread just lives in your pantry forever like some kind of immortal carb entity. But here's what you get in return. Flavor. Actual, complex, interesting flavor. Texture that makes you want to keep chewing. Nutrition that your body can actually use. And the satisfaction of supporting an actual person who's continuing a tradition that's older than written language. Every time you buy real bread from a real baker, you're voting with your dollars for a world where craftsmanship still matters, where quality beats convenience, where food is something to be savored, not just consumed. That's not nothing. And look, I get it. I'm not saying you have to become a bread snob who turns your nose up at a sandwich from Subway. I'm not saying you have to mill your own grain and only eat ancient einkorn fermented under a full moon. I'm just saying, pay attention, notice what you're eating, appreciate it, respect it, because bread shaped us, all of us. Every single human being alive today is here because our ancestors figured out how to turn grass seeds into civilization. That's not an exaggeration or poetic license. That's just history. Agriculture led to permanent settlements. Permanent settlements led to population growth. Population growth led to specialization. Specialization led to technology. Technology led to everything else. Without bread, you don't have cities. Without cities, you don't have universities. Without universities, you don't have science. Everything else is built on top of it. And even today, in our modern world where we can 3D print food and grow meat in labs and have every possible cuisine delivered to our door in 30 minutes, even now, bread still matters. Countries still subsidize it. Governments still fall when bread prices spike. People still choose bread as their comfort food when times are tough. Because bread isn't just calories, it's memory, it's comfort, it's home. It's the taste of your grandmother's kitchen and the smell of Saturday morning and the feeling of being taken care of. That's powerful stuff. So here's my actual challenge to you, beyond just watching this video and going, huh, neat. First, make bread at least once. Just once. See what it's like. I promise it's easier than you think and more rewarding than you can imagine. Second, buy real bread from a real bakery. You'll never go back. Third, share bread with someone. Invite someone over and break bread together. Cook for them. Feed them. There's something primal and bonding about sharing food that we're losing in our Uber Eats, eating over the sink alone culture. Fight against that. Fourth, learn about your own cultural bread traditions. Where did your ancestors come from? What did they eat? What was their bread? Can you find that recipe? Can you make it? Can you connect to your heritage through food? Because that's powerful. That's memory made edible. And finally, respect the bread. All bread. Even the weird stuff. Even the bread you don't personally like. Because every loaf represents someone's culture, someone's tradition, someone's history, That Ethiopian injera might not be your thing, but it's kept people alive in the highlands for thousands of years. That Russian black bread might seem weird, but it survived the siege of Leningrad. Every bread has a story. If you enjoyed this deep dive into bread history, and I mean really enjoyed it, like you're still thinking about it hours later and boring your friends with bread facts, then you're going to love what's coming next, because every food has a story like this. Every single thing we eat is the result of thousands of years of human trial and error, cultural exchange, happy accidents, and brilliant innovations. Next week, we're diving into salt. And let me tell you, salt is wild. Wars have been fought over salt. Empires have risen and fallen because of salt. The word salary literally comes from salt payments. Gandhi brought down the British Empire partially through salt. Salt was once more valuable than gold. Salt has been used as currency, as a preservative, as a weapon, as medicine. There are salt roads, salt mines, salt cities, salt cultures. And just like bread, salt is one of those things we completely take for granted. It's on every table. It's in every kitchen. We use it without thinking. But once you know the history, you'll never look at a salt shaker the same way again. So subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell, because we're going on a journey through food history, and trust me, it's going to be delicious, both literally and metaphorically. Drop a comment and tell me, what's your favorite bread? Where are you from? And what's your cultural bread tradition? Have you ever made bread? Are you going to try? I want to hear from you. Let's build a community of people who actually care about and appreciate the food that's kept humanity alive for 10,000 years. And hey, if you learned something from this video, if it changed how you think about bread, if it made you appreciate your morning toast just a little bit more, share it. Send it to your friend who's always talking about going low carb and needs to understand the cultural significance of what they're giving up. Send it to your foodie friend who thinks they know everything about food. Send it to your history nerd friend who will absolutely geek out over the part about bread causing the French Revolution. Food is culture. Food is history. Food is science. Food is art. Food is humanity. And bread is all of that, distilled into something you can hold in your hand. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. Thank you for caring enough about bread to watch a video essay that's basically the length of a movie. You're my people. You get it. Now go forth and respect the bread, appreciate the bread, make the bread, share the bread, be the bread. Okay, that last one doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and stay human, because at the end of the day, that's what bread taught us to be. Peace out, carb lovers. May your bread always rise, your crust always be golden, and your crumb always be perfect.